Oh, first video of 2021. What is going on, Reef Builders? I am Jake Adams. Welcome to the first video of this year from the Reef Builder Studio. I have been kind of cruising through the holiday period with some previously shot footage, but you know, every year is an opportunity to kind of evaluate how things are going and kind of like the style of the videos that we're doing. So I want to do a lot more kind of like simple videos where I can talk to you a little bit more directly without having to set up, you know, very elaborately in front of some aquariums. And for this video, I kind of want to talk about my aspirations for the fish that I have on my wish list, the fish that I want to get for the studio, because I've definitely been inspired by Dave Botwin of Oh Too Many Fish. He's an old friend of mine, and he's got a real run and gun style of vlogging what's going on with his aquarium right now. He's kind of doing a big shift over from one tank to another. He's gonna tear down the old tank. But anyway, Dave he's a crazy fish guy. He has so many freaking fish. He has more fish in his reef tanks than most people have in their fish only tanks, even myself included. I don't know how he gets away with having so many freaking fish in his tanks, but it definitely is egging me on to add more fish life to my coral aquariums. It's so much easier to pick up 10 or 15 corals at a time, dip them, put them in where they need to go, and kind of use them as needed. But with fish, it definitely takes a lot more attention and care and observation and quarantining to get them to settle into your aquariums very well, and to gel with the current fish populations that are in your tank. There's a lot more planning that goes on with acquiring fish. So what I did this morning is I installed a clicker app on my phone just to easily count the fish around the studio. And I came up with 130 fish. That sounds like a lot, but spread throughout about 16, 17 displays, and take away 50 of those that are different varieties of mollies. And it's really just a very light fish load throughout all the aquariums here at the studio. And yeah, I've been working on kind of some concepts for a fish wish list series. So some common fish that I want, some rare fish that I want, and some holy grail fish that I want. But just to give you a taste of those, some of the common fish I'm really interested in getting are some just plain old royal and black cap dramas. Those fish, when they're super happy and healthy and thriving in your aquarium, they are just absolutely phenomenal. Kind of on the rarer side of things, I would say some of the candy hogfish, the Terralabris hogfish. They're not super rare, but they're just really uncommon. People don't really seek them out as much as you'd think, but they're a little bit more delicate. And then kind of on the now holy grail list, I would say the zebra tang, Acanthurus polyzona, only comes from Mauritius, is one of my top ones. So some of these fish, I could source them myself and get a lot of these smaller fish directly, but before really ramping up to get a lot more fish, I wanted to give some consideration to the fish that I already have. You know, I have a lot of great fun pet fish just because they're really compatible with corals. I think 25 of my fish are probably surgeonfish. But every time I get fish, you know, it is a disruption to my day-to-day enjoyment of the aquariums because I have a new fish, and for better or for worse, it can be a little bit exciting. And that's because, you know, you have new fish, that's exciting to look at, but let's say 50% of the time, those fish might need some extra care. You know, they might need some copper treatment for ick. That's kind of like a baseline protocol for quarantining most fish. A lot of the larger fish, lots of showy angelfish and butterfly fish are plagued by flukes, which require an extra level of care and quarantining. So I really kind of came across 3 of the favorite fish here at the studio, and it just so happens that they are from TSM Aquatics. So this video is actually brought to you by TSM Aquatics, but I want to tell you why these 3 fish are some of my favorites in the studio. So let's start out with the aberrant dottyback. This was the first fish I got here at the studio, and this was the first fish I ever got from TSM Aquatics. And you know, I can condition and quarantine fish with the best of them, but it takes effort. It takes energy and water changes and medication and attention to detail to get it right so you don't introduce unwanted pests or parasites to your established aquariums. So the aberrant dottyback is doing very well in a very luscious Euphilia garden. I think you know, you see a lot of tanks that are labeled Euphilia garden, but this one is wall-to-wall Euphilia polyps. Really, really cool tank. The dottyback, you know, kind of behaves exactly as you would expect. You know, it's a little bit aggressive, so I haven't been able to add new fish in with it. I wouldn't mind kind of shuffling it around to add more fish to the Euphilia garden. But that was one of the first fish I got from TSM Aquatics before I had any quarantining setups here. And so that was kind of a cool fish to have. It's gotten larger and showier, so I'm very glad to have that fish. Next up would be the rainbow basslet. Now the Leopropomas, man, they're not super common. Some species are very rare, very colorful, from very exotic locations and from really deep water. And some of the larger species definitely suffer from decompression issues where they're kind of floating tail up a little bit, and over time that saps a lot of their energy, and it's just a real challenge to work with them. So I was really lucky to get my rainbow basslet directly from TSM, so they had already put in the work to it to make it a good aquarium fish. And man, those mediums, even small, medium-sized Leopropomas, they can be very hidey at first, you know, but once they settle in, man, they really put out as much personality as like 5 medium-sized tanks. It's quite incredible. And so the rainbow basslet, I did have quarantine tanks set up at that time, but they were already filled. I already had a quarantine period going in, and when I received that fish, so that's why I got it from TSM Aquatics instead of getting a fresh one myself, is because I didn't want to disrupt my quarantining process, and I know that TSM really goes the distance. But then the third fish is actually 2 fish. It's my pair of Tinker's butterfly fish. Man, these guys are so freaking awesome. I learned about Tinker's butterfly fish when I was a teenager, you know, scrubbing tanks at the local fish store. And back then they were $300, which, you know, was a lot of money for the 90s. And the butterfly fish, you know, especially an expensive, valuable one like the Tinkers, you know, they require a little more coaxing, a little bit more encouragement to get started eating. Not just, you know, pecking here and there, but, you know, really good putting on weight and being robust. And so I started my pair of Tinkers, since I got them from TSM, straight into a reef tank because I had faith in their procedures. And over time, they actually kind of split up in that reef environment for some reason, so there was some aggression. And then they also developed an affinity, a taste for some of the fleshier corals and some of the red corals, you know, like lords and little moon corals. Not so much polyps and not SPSs, so you could keep them in a reef tank, but I decided I would much rather have them in my fish display where I can feed them as much as I want. And although they're 2 fish, I feel like they eat as much as about 5 fish because they just pop the food really, really quickly. So why is TSM, you know, why do I hold TSM Aquatics in such high regard? And this is because I know how they handle their fish, how they quarantine their fish. So there's a whole spectrum of quarantining protocols. And I would say, you know, at its most baseline, you throw a fish into a tank with some basic copper levels for 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, you just call it done. And as you saw in one of my previous videos, when I put out a lot of fish that had actually been quarantined for like 2 months, I used visual inspection to make sure the fish were acting right, they had 0 spots, their fins were great, their belly was fine. And you know what? I held back, I think the Potter's angelfish, because he just had a little spot on his side, and I wanted to hold it back until it was in perfect condition. And so on one end of the spectrum, you know, you have the dump and pray approach, where you just kind of throw fish into your tank and hope for the best, whether it's, you know, the disease or coral nipping or getting along with your fish population. But I know from experience with TSM Aquatics that they have a very rigorous quarantine system, quarantine protocol. So certain fish, like larger showy butterflies and angelfish, they'll get, a second level of inspection, probably some dips, whether that be freshwater or Prezi Quanto, aka Prezi Pro, to remove flukes, and they'll be conditioned as long as they need to be. There's no set period. When the fish, really step up and become great, beautiful aquarium fish, that's when they're ready to go. But the one thing that I believe TSM Aquatics does that no one else does is they take a scraping. They take that sounds really bad. They just scrape off a little bit of mucus off the side of the fish, maybe in the gills, probably, maybe not quite that far, but they'll take that scraping of the mucus from the fish's scales, and they'll put that under a microscope, and they'll visually inspect it for smaller parasites that can take fish down, but are not necessarily visible to the naked eye. And, the aquarium hobby is very much under scrutiny for the number and the quantity of fish that are harvested from wild reefs. And I know everyone watching this video, unless you're an absolute total green newbie, you've bought fish more than once, because something happened to it, because it jumped out, because it got sick, because it got sick, because it got sick. And if you have to replace a $60, $69 flame angel even one time, instead of buying, I don't know how much they charge, but let's say an $80 to $100 flame angel that has really been through the rigorous system, not only are you reducing your impact on natural reef populations of fish, but you're also saving money. I know a lot of people, I worked retail for a long time, that would just come by month after month to get a Naso tang or to get that fish that they had to have on their list, and through not having a great system and not quarantining, not conditioning, and simply not having really thoroughly conditioned offerings from like TSM Aquatics, people ended up, spending $300 on $50 fish. You guys know what I'm talking about. And what's funny is, after all of this experience of being in the aquarium hobby for about 25-ish years, still make mistakes, So I quarantine and condition my fish super thoroughly, and make one mistake and you'll pay for it. And I'm still kind of paying for it because about 2 months ago, I think I came across a very low price, a very high quality, large size flagfin angelfish. Looked perfect, looked beautiful. I put it in quarantine. I put it in quarantine with copper for about, I want to say 3 to 4 weeks. And I just skipped a step, man. I didn't give it a freshwater dip. I didn't give it a good visual inspection. I didn't treat it with Prezi Pro, and ended up introducing flukes into my saltwater fish only aquarium. And yes, I can treat the tank, but it's not that simple. I'm on my 3rd or 4th round of Prezi Pro treatment in my precious saltwater fish only aquarium, and it just takes the fun out of it, So basically, all I'm trying to say here is you really have to appreciate, recognize, scrutinize the fish that you get. I really have a lot of faith in the quarantining procedures and conditioning protocols of TSM Aquatics. So some of the cheaper, common, more widely available fish I'll probably get on my own, but for anything outside of that realm, anything that is sometimes a roll of the dice, I'm definitely going to be calling up TSM Aquatics for some of the fish that I want them to do the work on. Like I said, I have the quarantine systems, I have the knowledge, I have the experience, and I don't always want to take it to completion. It's a lot of work. So unless I get a huge batch all at once and I'm committed to really putting a lot of energy into those fish for 1 to 2 months, I just assume get a neat, perfect fish from TSM Aquatics. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It's probably not the most entertaining, but I hope it's more informative. And I know a lot of you have experiences with, buying fish multiple times, introducing diseases in your tank, and even challenges in hospitalizing and quarantining your fish. I think all of the aquarium authors feel like a broken record when time and time again, we really push people to quarantine the fish themselves. There's a few stores that really, do their best. but a lot of them is just kind of a token, put the fish in the back for a week or two, and once they're kind of okay, they'll put them out for sale. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like. We're gonna put up a lot more videos in 2021. I know it's easy to say, we have a lot of big plans for this year, but I'm gonna try to bring you a lot more videos hard and fast. I wanna see some comments from you guys about your fish experiences. Big thanks to TSM Aquatics for enriching the fish population here at the Reef Builders Studio and for bringing this important topic to our audience. So thanks for joining me on this video, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye.